Mr. Johnson,
Inzamam.
thank you so much for your time. Welcome to the UAE.
Great pleasure to be here.
I've read every single page of the book.
I'm so honoured and amazed.
And listened to the
incredulous.
Yeah, and listened to the 26 plus hours of your voice
My God.
narrating it, which is fascinating to see. I just want to touch on, you've been traveling, you look very happy. I've seen your wife's Instagram has been posting a lot of pictures on your travels as well. And you're spending some quality time with your family. How's life been since leaving?
It's wonderful to have that freedom and to do all the things that I'm currently doing. I'm never going to deny that, and it's bliss in many ways. But it's also frustrating to see things going in not the way I would have done things. And I keep thinking, we was robbed, because as I say in the Unleashed,
Yep.
when I resigned, we were very close in the polls, and the Reform Party was nowhere. And I think we wouldn't have the current situation. I think we would have won. So I regret that.
Yeah, we're in the UAE.
Yes.
In Dubai. You visited a few times as Prime Minister, and since you've left the post, I'd really like to get your take on the UAE's role in terms of global diplomacy. How much of an important role do you think this nation can take when it comes to the situation in the Middle East, Russia and Ukraine?
Look, I think as I say in Unleashed, I describe the UAE as the country in the world that probably punches more above its weight than any other. I think and that's true. It's an amazing place, and it has a big diplomatic and political role around the world. And I think that if you look at the Middle East and the tragedy unfolding in Palestine, the misery of people in Gaza, suffering in South Lebanon, clearly the UAE has an important role to play in trying to find with a lot of us in trying to find a solution. And if I think back to the genesis of this current nightmare with the October the 7th atrocity committed by Hamas, or atrocities, there's no question in my mind that was kind of set on by Iran to stop a process that UAE was really heavily involved in, and I think doing a great thing.
You talk about that in the book, and we'll come on to that. I want to ask something a bit about what's happened over the last 24 hours. The president of the UAE, Mohammed bin Zayed, is currently in Russia meeting Vladimir Putin. I'd be interested to get your take on that visit and how it makes you feel as someone who was and is very anti-Putin, seeing another world leader being welcomed on a state visit like that.
Well, don't forget that the UAE was absolutely solid throughout in the UN in condemning Putin's invasion of Ukraine.
But it's still going on.
And the policy of the UAE is to condemn that invasion. I passionately agree with that. I think that different governments take different approaches to how to deal with this catastrophe. And the BRICS summit is going on, as you know, in Kazan right now, and so and Narendra Modi's there too. And I would have the same discussions with him as I might have with Sheikh Mohammed, His Highness. And I would, my view is well known. It's that what Putin did was criminal and unforgivable, and there's only one way to fix this, and that's for him to get out. And Ukraine is a sovereign, independent country. They voted on their borders in 1991, and it's got to be fixed. But I won't. What I think is absolutely correct is that since the invasion in February 2022, different countries took different views of how to deal with it. My country, various others, decided that the answer was to equip the Ukrainians, to try to help them, to expel the Russian invader. Other countries have taken a more supple approach.
Does it sometimes make you feel a bit uncomfortable when you see a world leader who, you would have worked closely with as well.
And still do, or rather, the UK still does.
For sure, on that stage with
I think
Putin.
I think you have to accept sometimes with your friends, even your closest friends, that there are going to be issues where you just don't, you're not marching in complete lockstep. And so it would be the same with, I was very fortunate in the relationship I was able to strike up with Modi in Delhi, and or any other member of the of the BRICS, and like the Turks or whoever. There's a I think we have to accept that there isn't a sort of one size fits all cookie cutter diplomatic answer to this. But what is absolutely clear is that the UAE was totally solid in condemning the invasion.
Talking about the Middle East now and the wider situation here, in the book you talk about if Saudi Arabia was to accept Israel as a state, to sign on the dotted line of the Abraham Accord, that everything would be hunky-dory, there'd be trade situations. But, I mean, after a year of bloodshed, after a year of inhumane killings, after a year of Israel breaking countless humanitarian laws, I mean, you must be in a bit of a kind of a dream world thinking that Saudi Arabia might sign that.
It certainly doesn't look, likely to happen anytime soon because of the catastrophe that's been unfolding. But as I said, right at the beginning of our conversation, I think that the reason that Hamas were funded and inspired and set on to commit those atrocities on October the 7th last year, 2023, and they were terrible things that they did against innocent civilians, was because Iran, the mullahs, were so horrified by the process that the UAE was integral.
Absolutely, but since then, what we have seen has been absolute brutality. And at the end of the day, signing that Abraham Accord now is probably further away than ever before. Do you think what has gone on, particularly from Israel's side, has pushed talks back?
I think that, I'm a former UK Foreign Secretary, right? So I'm the heir of A.J. Balfour, who made the Balfour Declaration and effectively created the desire. Well, we sold the same camel twice, right?
Yeah.
And everybody can see what went wrong. The only solution has got to be a homeland for the Palestinian people. That has to be the solution.
Is this are they going the right way about it?
The tragedy, I think, well, there are many tragedies, but it certainly has been one of the greatest tragedies that the Palestinians in all my lifetime have never yet found the leader with the imagination or the ability to see that you have to accommodate the existence of the state of Israel.
I get that, but I'm talking specifically about the last 12 months and Israel's consistent brutal attack, not just on Palestine now, but also in Lebanon. Do you not feel uncomfortable with the level of pain and suffering that Israel is causing?
Well, I think that the looking first at, yes, of course I do. I mean, the answer to your question is yes. And I'm not here to defend everything done by Israel, the Israeli Defense Force. But what I certainly do believe is that on the whole, there is notwithstanding the suffering of the people of Gaza, there is a moral difference between the actions of the Israeli Defense Force and Hamas, which is an Islamist terrorist group whose leaders and whose entire membership is devoted to not just to the extermination of the state of Israel, but to murdering all the Jewish people, not just in Israel, but around the world.
But do Palestinians and Lebanese people also not have the right to defend themselves?
Well, of course they do, but the problem is that you've got a terrorist group in the form of Hamas, an Islamist group, that actively wants to murder all Jews. And the stated objective is to wipe Israel off the map. And as I said earlier on in my answer to you, that, I wish somehow that there could be a leadership in Palestine, where the people must have a homeland, that could make that essential accommodation and not have an agenda that is so nihilistic and so disastrous. Because if you're a democratic leader in Israel and your population is it comes under attack in the way that it did on October the 7th, it is very difficult to do anything except to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah,
there's
a difference between that and brutal murder of women and children.
Well,
there is a huge difference.
Of course there is. And look, but and perhaps we're not going to agree on this, but my view is that, and I accept that many of the things that have happened in Gaza have been appalling, and no doubt there's been a great deal of unnecessary suffering. But by and large, I believe it has been the intention of the Israeli Defense Force to minimize human suffering, whereas it has been the intention of Hamas to maximize human suffering and to maximize the pain of innocent people. And
I find that very difficult to understand, that you believe that the IDF are trying to minimize human suffering.
I think that they've
given the number of people that they have killed.
I think that they're trying to prevent an atrocity such as
doing that well, are they?
October 7th from happening again. Well, I think that we all have to ask ourselves, including in the UAE or anywhere, whether we want a society which is led by people who, not only want to exterminate Jewish people, but don't have particularly progressive views on homosexuals, on gay rights, let alone on women, who live by an extraordinarily, who are basically operating criminal rackets. In the end, it was their choice. Yeah. It was their choice. It was Yahya Sinwar's choice and everybody in Hamas's choice to launch that raid, that murderous raid on Israel. Yep. And I really don't see what I'm going back to my point. Suppose I'd been Prime Minister of the UK, right? And somebody had some other government, and it's a government, Hamas, right? They run the show, or they did. Suppose some other government had decided to commit a massacre in the UK on that scale. It would have been a huge number of people pro rata. Absolutely. A huge number of people.
Absolutely.
And not only would they have died, they would have been murdered, maimed, raped.
But this is all hindsight. This is actually happening now.
No, but I'm telling
Israel are actually doing this.
I'm telling you how I would have responded, and how I would actually responded in real time. I would have had to make sure, using all the power at the disposal of the British state, to make sure those people never did anything of that kind again.
I think you would have been a bit more measured, though.
I think that
I'm giving you credit for that.
But I'm just saying that's I'm just giving you my honest view.
Understood. US elections, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump.
And I think it's be a good thing, by the way, for the world and for the Middle East, of the UAE, if people like Hamas don't run the show. And I just want to get back to this point. We need leaders, and I share your horror and your disgust and I understand it. But the future has got to belong to people who are willing to compromise on these essential points. And that doesn't mean I don't. I think Israel has done a lot of wrong stuff in the West Bank, and I think that there's got to be a two-state solution. There will have to be movements. There will have to be changes. But in the end, there's got to be a recognition of Israel's right to exist.
You now know my next question: U.S. election, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump?
I think.
Don't tell me who you think is going to win. Tell me who you would like to win.
Look, I think the job of prime minister is to have a good relationship with whoever's in.
You're no longer the prime minister,
and I don't want to.
You're no longer the prime minister,
I know, and I don't want to you know, I think it's wrong for us to get involved in
Who's
elections of
better?
friendly countries.
Who's
What I will
better
say
for the
now-
world? Who's better
What
for
I
the
will
world?
say, and I've said lots of times, is that I think that those who have a horror of Donald Trump are seriously mistaken. And I think that actually, when it came to foreign policy, he did a lot of good stuff.
He said he'll fix the issues in Russia and Ukraine in a day. The Middle East as well, he said he will fix fairly quickly. Is that something you believe he can do?
The Middle East or Russia and Ukraine? I think both of them are very tricky now, very sad. And I think the most important thing is to be strong and to stick up for our values and to stick up for freedom. And I'm sure he will do that. So what I was going to say about Trump is I don't have this sort of liberal, horror of the guy. I think actually on Ukraine, on Syria, on Iran, you can make a pretty good case for what he did when he was in office. He was actually tougher than the Democrats. He really was. He bombed Assad's chemical weapons stuff. He stopped. He never used chemical weapons again. He wiped out Qasem Soleimani, the IRGC. He gave the Ukrainians shoulder-launched anti-tank weapons.
Iran.
Sanctioned Iran. And there was the Abraham Accords, which whatever you may say, which this country played a distinguished role in. And I think it was a progressive thing. I think it was the right way forward.
He's got a better international track record. Is that fair
I would
to
say he's a much better international track record than his detractors say.
Fair
Now,
play.
does that mean I'm optimistic about a Trump presidency? Yes, actually it does. And I've got no embarrassment about saying that. And do I like him? Yes, I do. I don't mind if people, shoot me. I do. I like his, I can't help it. Also, I'm a human being. Human beings tend to like people who like them. Yeah. And he's always been very friendly to me. He was very friendly to the United Kingdom. He loved Brexit. We did a lot of good stuff together. And good.
I just want to take you back to 2018, Mr. Johnson, if you don't mind. Before your time in Number 10, you wrote in the Daily Telegraph at the time about women wearing the burqa, and you related that to letterboxes and to bank robbers. A lot of people found those comments incredibly offensive. We're sat here in Dubai today, in a Muslim country, where women across this region wear the burqa. Do you have any remorse, any regret for those comments which were deeply offensive?
Well, I'm always sorry if I've given offense to people, but my view is that people should be entitled to wear what they want. I think that was the substance of the article, to be honest.
But it's the letterboxes and bank robbers referral. That's was it too far? Was it too far?
No, look, I'm a freedom-loving, West European. There you go. I mean, I happen to think, again, I happen to think that it's nicer and friendlier if you can see people's faces. And
you don't regret saying it.
I was trying to make a point about freedom, and it was, I was actually defending the freedom of people to wear what they want. If you read the piece,
I did.
But
I think
people often in my they pick out words and they go crazy.
Understood. You were the architect of Brexit and Brexit's transition after we left the EU. Since then, with a backdrop of the cost of living crisis, we've actually seen more millionaires leaving the UK than ever before, and actually at one of the highest rates in the world as well.
Sorry, they're leaving the UK now because they've got a Labour government.
No, this has happened. No. This has happened before when the Conservative government were also in charge. We've seen this happen over the last 3 to 4 years since leaving the European Union.
Nonsense.
Many of them coming here to the Middle East as well. Does that not kind of make you think maybe we should be keeping those people who will be pumping a lot into the economy in the UK?
I think it's great that we've got a huge diaspora here in the UAE. I think there are about 300,000, 240,000 people from Britain in the UAE. That's wonderful.
But we're losing a lot of them.
Well, they go to and fro, and there's a huge economic symbiosis between Britain and the UAE.
Yeah, but the point is people who would be pumping money into the British economy are fed up, had enough, aren't as well off, and are now leaving.
I totally reject your characterization of that. What's actually happening is that because of the change to the non-dom rule, which wasn't brought in by me but brought in by my successor, and also because of the threat of CGI, capital gains tax going up, and various other taxes, some people are moving. That is absolutely true. But it was nothing to do with Brexit. It certainly wasn't happening when I was in charge. And actually, if you look at Brexit, and one of the most important things about Brexit was that it gave us regulatory freedom to do things differently and to do things better. And so when it comes to things like vaccines, we were able to have a faster vaccine rollout than anywhere else in Europe because we were outside the European Medicines Agency. So that meant that elderly people in Britain they had their lives saved because we vaccinated half our population by the time the EU was on 10%.
Last few questions.
And that made a huge difference.
If I may, your time in office, in the book, particularly around the COVID time, as you just mentioned there, around parties, around gatherings, you kind of still remain quite unrepentant.
No, I think if you read Unleashed, Unleashed.
I have all 770 plus pages.
Read Unleashed.
But is it very hard to just say sorry and actually mean it?
So if you read Unleashed, you will see I take full responsibility for everything that happened. And as I say in the book, I think one of the problems with the blanket apology that I issued at the very beginning was that it seemed to accept in advance all the nonsense criticism, all the allegations
that came with it
that were made later.
So what are you sorry
which
for?
Turned out not to be true.
What are you sorry for?
Read Unleashed.
No, what?
So I think.
What are you sorry for?
I think it was a mistake. One thing I could have done, in retrospect, was I could have told everybody in Whitehall, for God's sake, though you're being watched by people who don't necessarily have your best interests at heart and may very well try to cause trouble. You not only got to obey the rules, you've got to be seen to obey the rules. I could have done something like that.
That just sounds like saying just watch out, people are watching.
Yeah, no, but obey the rules. Okay. Obey the rules and be seen to obey the rules. And I think that would have helped. But the important point is for people who aren't familiar with this story, that anybody who thinks that my officials were setting out to have parties and disobey the rules is living in cloud cuckoo land. It's complete nonsense. They were working round the clock. They were working incredibly hard. Yeah. And they did a stunning job, in case I didn't mention it before, in the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe.
Yeah. And we spoke to Nadeem about that a lot.
Which was only possible because of Brexit. So if you're asking me, do I think it was all, frankly, a bit of a stunted up, put up job by the media? The answer is yes, I do. Do I think that it was wrong to seem to inculpate, to blame the whole of officialdom and seem to accuse everybody in number 10 of partying? Yes, I do. I think it was totally wrong.
You write in Unleash about your downfall and how you relate it to Julius Caesar's assassination.
Well, in the sense that yes, I mean you need it. Yeah. It was a multiple. I
get that, but Gove, Sunak, all those people around you. Do you feel that they kind of stuck the knife in because they actually thought that maybe your time is up and maybe it's someone?
I think they thought
fresh needs to come along.
Look, in the Tory party, so when you've been running the Tory party for a long time, or when the Tory party's been in power for a long time, then you start to get the backbenches kind of saturated with people who feel a bit disappointed and who wonder whether.
What about the people you appointed?
Wonder whether the same goes for them. They wonder whether it might be time they might do better under someone else, and so clearly they were wrong about that because the thing went off a cliff.
Would you ever forgive Michael Gove?
Would you ever forgive Michael Gove? We crashed in the polls, and. Look, I'm an infinitely forgiving and
Do you forgive him?
I'm infinitely. I believe in forgiveness, and
So
perhaps,
do you forgive him then? And you believe in forgiveness, but do you forgive Michael Gove?
Well, look,
or is there a day you think you could?
as I say in the book, I have an irrational and an excessive fondness for Michael Gove, and that continues.
Nadeem Zahawi told us that if he was to take over the Telegraph newspapers, he'd be silly not to hire you and give you a role.
Very, very kind of him.
Who do you want to see take it over, and would you accept a job there?
Look, the Telegraph's a very great paper. It's one of the great papers in the world. I worked on it for a long time. I've contributed thousands of articles to Telegraph in the past, but I'm currently very happy writing for Her Majesty's Daily, or His Majesty's Daily Mail, and
so wouldn't go back there, even if your friend took it over.
Also, a very, very great paper, and I commend readers, viewers, to my column in the Daily Mail, which appears every Saturday. If you haven't read
Excellent.
Unleashed,
I want to get your take also on the Telegraph. Abu Dhabi organisation was set to take it over. That was blocked by the UK Parliament. Nadeem Zahawi said that he was disturbed and saddened by that. How did it make you feel?
No, I wasn't.
Is that right?
I wasn't. I don't think I was even in Parliament when that happened.
But is it right that we should be blocking?
I wasn't even in Parliament when that happened. And what I will say is I believe that Abu Dhabi, the UAE, are great friends and partners of the UK.
So why are we blocking them having ownership of a newspaper?
I was not there when that happened, and it was not my government what did it.
Would you have let your government?
It was not my government what did it.
Would you have let your government?
Well, it's a hypothetical question.
Okay. Finally, the book, I think, left a big question. Certainly for me, would you ever go back and consider running for Prime Minister again?
The answer to that question.
It isn't.
Inzamam.
It isn't.
Inzamam, the answer to that question is contained.
It isn't.
Unleashed.
Tell me the answer here. Would you ever consider running for Prime Minister again?
What I do say is that I would only consider doing anything like that if I thought I could be useful again. And you see, in Unleashed, I try to tell the story of how it is an argument about freedom and about believing in Britain and the things I wanted to do. It's about believing in the independence of the country and a certain model of democratic freedom that we needed to get from Brexit. And by the time of 2019, there was just nobody else in the Tory party who could really deliver that. To be honest, I mean, it sounds boastful, but it's really true. We'd spent 3 years going round and round in circles. And, back to the earlier point I made about the European Medicines Agency, we would have stayed in all that sort of stuff. We would have stayed run by the EU, even if we were out of the EU. So I had to do it.
So the idea of running is not off the table.
Only if it's useful.
It's not off the table.
In 2008, they literally run out of better ideas. They had no one else to be mayor of London. You remember this? Were you in London at the time?
I was in London at the time, but I was young.
You were young. I'm not going to ask you who you voted for, but
I couldn't.
You couldn't. It's too young to vote. For me, first time round.
I just want to know: is the idea of running for Prime Minister off the table?
Or is it
still there?
It's all in Unleashed, and my view
it's
is
not. The answer to that question is not.
That's because I don't know whether I really don't see the circumstances in which I could be useful again. We're going to have a new leader very soon. I'm sure he or she will be excellent. I'm not in Parliament. I'm very happily. I'm living in life of rustic obscurity when I'm not in Dubai, flogging Unleashed to brilliant Arabian Business channel.